Welcome back to Men Explained. I'm here with Josh.
What's up, man?
Not much, brother. We're going to get into it today.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some good stuff.
Yeah, what are we talking about today?
We're going to get into men's mental health. So today's topic is going to be around toxic masculinity, society, nature versus nurture, kind of how we were raised, what it's like to contend with some of the things that men contend with.
Yeah, and how that affects our mental health as men.
Yes.
So I think a good preface to this is a couple things. One is that, we kind of come up with the topic to talk about, right? And one of the things I think we will talk about is that we didn't want to have like this real rigid outline, and we're going to go from depression to bipolar to blah, 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 blah. That's not what we're doing, right? It's kind of, it's going to be a little bit free flowing. We want to stick to a structure. So we might kind of get off on side trails. So we don't want to be, we're not unaware of that, right? So just so people know. And the number two thing with the mental health, if you're experiencing depression, if you're having thoughts about suicide, hurting yourself or hurting others, reach out to somebody. I think that's super important for people to know that there's a lot of resources for people with mental health issues. It's a big problem. There's still stigma behind it. I hate that. I wish it weren't that way. And I think we'll probably chime in with some of that at the end with the numbers for mental health and suicide prevention hotlines and stuff like that. So people can, if there's anybody listening who's in that deep, dark hole and they need help, that they can call. So,
yeah. So you mentioned kind of the stigmas that you hated, that it was still around mental health specifically for men.
Yep.
Where does that come from? Like, what does that mean to you?
Where did the stigma comes from? Like, where does that come from?
Yeah. Just like you mentioned that you didn't like that it was still there and that it's still a problem. And why is there such friction there?
Well, I think that a lot of people who don't have the issues just kind of tell people like, well, just, and it's not even the old term, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's just kind of like, well, we all know that like all these different things make us feel good. So why don't you go do it? And it's like, no, there's literally a mental health problem there. This is not a voluntary thing. Like people don't want to stay inside all day long and they don't want to just wallow in their depression. Nobody wants that. But it's an issue of whether it's, again, the nature versus nurture. Is there something that's happened to these people that's driven them into this position? Or is there, chemical imbalances in the brain caused by other issues that have led to this, right? It's just not this simple, like, hey, just wake up and go outside and look at the sun and you'll feel better, right? It's not, that's not the way it works. So I think that a lot of people, I think if you've never had depression, I've experienced depression in the past, I don't know if you have, and it is like unlike anything else that it's really hard. I mean, we all go through grieving periods and sad times.
Worst thing to hear when you're going through little bouts of it is to just get over it.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Right.
It's it's a kick in the pills.
Yep. And there's a time for that,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if I got a buddy and I'm pissing and moaning about something that happened 6 months ago that was so little, I want somebody to grab me by the slap me in the face. They grow up, right? There's a time and place for that, right?
Yep.
But if somebody loses somebody who they love, like there's a time to grieve for that, right? And then, but that can really go sideways on people completely unintentionally. And then, then you get into substance abuse and then you get into like that self-hate and all these different things. It just snowballs on people. And it's not, nobody wants that. It's not intentional. So I think, there's always a time and place for some of that, like that tough love, right?
Yep.
But rarely is it within the true situation of somebody feeling depressed.
And as we're growing up as little boys, before we're even teenagers, what is it that we hear a lot?
Yep.
Don't be a pussy.
Yep.
Don't cry like a girl.
Yep.
Don't show your emotions. You got to suppress them. Got to be tough.
Yep.
Got to get over it. So we're conditioned at a very young age, from a sociological standpoint, to just kind of repress it, right?
Yep. Just shove it
type
down.
in it.
Yep.
So we would be remiss not to bring up the topic of toxic masculinity in this conversation. So,
because that plays a lot into perpetuating the stigmas,
right,
which I have an issue with that too. So
go on.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this toxic masculinity is either a completely true term for a certain group of people or a completely false term for another group of people, right? I think there's certain guys that I look up to and read and listen to for my self-help, right? There's guys like Jocko Willink and Andy Frisella, There's all these guys who are, when you go around them, like you automatically know, like you're around a dude, right?
Sure.
And you're around a dude that, like, if you pushed them the wrong way, they'd snap you in half. Like, even like they're dudes, they train themselves to be a way that they are. But if you talk to them, they're really, really good, genuine human beings who want the best for people. Yeah. And they see that, and they deliver this kind of tough love in a way when they can recognize when somebody needs it, right? But then they also understand the value of understanding when someone needs help with their mental health.
Yeah.
And some people see those guys as toxic because they do want men to stand up and kind of lead, right? And there's plenty of women who are fantastic leaders. I work for women, and I've worked with women. I've been trained by women in my job, right? And it's like I communicate with women who are considered, I don't want to say they're higher up than me, but like where I refer to and talk to and get direction from, right? And I have no problem with it whatsoever. Like it doesn't bother me. I find value in that because there's a lot of times where I would do something stupid. Women says, maybe we just didn't do it that way, moron. They don't say that, but I'm saying like, well, it's pretty stupid of me to think that way, and they provide great perspective and outlets, right? But there is a place in society where we need good men who will stand up and lead others and tell people kind of what you need to do, right? And people see that as a toxic masculinity thing. Mm-hmm. Like don't let someone cancel you, or don't let somebody kind of tell you the way that you need to be, or that the things that you believe in are wrong, right? If those things are normal and healthy, like going to the gym every day and exercising, taking care of your body, taking care of your hormones, right? Doing all these different medical things that we kind of talked about in our first episode. Some people see that as toxic because it perpetuates manly men, mm-hmm. right? Which, I think if you talk to most women, they want a manly man. Like, I don't, yes. I'm not saying that's true for all women. Some women don't want that, right? But then they don't look for that. Yeah. But then there are other guys who are toxic, right? Who are just dicks, right? Mm-hmm. Who treat women like crap. They treat other people like crap. They try to walk on people, right? They take advantage of other people. They try to use their ego and insecurities as a masquerade for masculinity, right, in order to think like, oh yeah, I'm the tall walking guy swinging a big stick. And it's like, usually those guys are the most insecure guys in the room. Now that is truly toxic masculinity, right? Mm-hmm. There's probably some mental health issues there, or something that happened that turned them to be that way, to cover those things up. Mm-hmm. So it's, I think there's a pretty big divide between those two. There's a Grand Canyon sized gap between true toxic masculinity and then what some people want to label, because they don't want to have those skills of being able to kind of stand up and again plant that flag and be part of a community of men who strive for good things and better things, and it's a really interesting phenomenon. I don't quite understand it, but that's what we're here to kind of figure out, right?
We're gonna try. It's we're certainly living at a time where kind of planting your flag and having a mission, or having a statement and a self-belief, mm-hmm. can be too far, and can almost be seen as like, okay, you need to tame it down. You're standing out too much, right? And that can make other people feel like, you're making them feel small, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So you're kind of walking in there, or you mentioned being around those guys that know when to turn on Jocko. Mm-hmm. They know when to do that. To me, I associate that with masculine energy. Yeah, it's the energy. And when you mentioned that that women prefer men, I think it's the energy, and that's a very different energy than is the toxic energy that we see, where it's coming from a place of fear, coming from a place of insecurity, a place of pain.
Oh yeah, yeah.
If I grew up and my dad packed the bags and said see ya, and I never saw him again, my trust in fellowship and tribe and brotherhood would be shit. Yeah. And who could blame me for it? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to react to try and make myself feel better, bigger, mm-hmm. because at my depth, at my core, I don't feel enough. I don't feel complete.
Yeah. Yeah. Inadequacy. I think it's the biggest thing that drives a lot of guys, either the feeling or the fear of it. Right. They just don't ever feel good enough. Right. I see a therapist every week, and that's the biggest thing that we talk about is of this feeling of inadequacy. Yeah. It comes from my dad, exactly what you said. My dad, when I was 3 years old, he left.
Right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, left our family. Was cheating on my mom. He was.
I'm sorry,
yeah,
man.
no, it is what it is, right? I mean, I think it's a long time ago, and over the years, that feeling of inadequacy creeps up and rears its ugly head at certain times, right? And that's what we kind of talk about every week. Like, well, what happened this week? Let's talk about A, B, C, and D. And like, well, how did that make you feel? I'm like, well, it made me feel inadequate, right? And she's like, well, why? And I'm like, which is like, what, like, how, like, what is that? Like, what age does that remind you of? Like, when did you kind of start to feel that? And then it's like, we kind of dig into that and you realize like, holy shit, man, I've been feeling this way for my whole life. And I don't want to be driven by that. Like, how do I fix that? Right. And it's through communication and, you know, going through therapy that helps. Yeah. Right. And it kind of helps finding the problem. So then you can fix the problem.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think if you talk to most guys, they, at some point in their life, they were made to feel small and insignificant, whether it was by their dad, by their mom, or by a woman. Those are kind of the three big ones, right? That really flip guys in the wrong direction. And then they start to go off on their own and do bad stuff. And so I think finding that and getting that figured out is huge, because that you let that sit there and grow. Yeah. I mean, that's when you run into really kind of bad situations, and you can't form true relationships because you're always looking out for yourself. Like, well, I feel inadequate around these people, so I'm going to avoid that. Right. Or I'm not going to face that challenge because I'm too afraid I feel inadequate, so I'm not going to overcome that. Right. Mm-hmm. Or you go down the toxic masculinity route where you're like, I'm going to overcompensate for everything, so everybody thinks that I can do anything, when you're really just super insecure and you're just kind of broken inside. And
you think that you've got a poker face on.
Yeah.
But everybody around you
is looking at you going, what's wrong with
there's something off.
Yeah.
Because it's my belief that it's because your energy's off.
Yeah.
You're not open.
Yep.
You're not receptive. Your walls are up. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you went to therapy, which is a big admission.
Yeah.
And you led with that. I too go see a therapist. I have in the past, but I started to go about 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And this time I decided to go to a man, not because women therapists are not very trained or they're not skilled. They're very talented. I needed somebody who could relate to what I went through or what I go through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yeah.
So I chose to go to a guy. I'd like to know what you get most out of going to see a therapist, because it's been very rewarding in the 3 or 4 months that I've gone. Mm-hmm. Sounds like you've been going for a while, or you go more frequently.
A little over a month. So, and I actually see a woman therapist.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that I get out of it mostly is you get to go kind of openly talk to somebody about what the hell's going on in my life. Yeah. And just the things that kind of have happened, and have somebody take an objective view and kind of pinpoint like, hey, we've talked about all this stuff in the past. Like, do you see how this kind of pattern is repeating, and and how, like, and kind of working through that, right? It's not a 1 month process. I mean, therapy's a long time, and you get into some stuff that you don't necessarily want to talk about, but if you don't, none of your problems are going to get fixed. Yeah. So I just like being able to kind of go and kind of like in an unemotional, like non-confrontational way, kind of just unload on somebody. Yeah. Right. Now, I don't want that. That's a bad term, but I can just kind of open up the book of like crap that I've been dealing with and just put it out there. And they say, okay, let's talk about it. Instead of being like, oh, what's wrong with you? Right. And you go on a first date and you say that, so, you know,
yeah.
Hey, you blocked my number. What's going on? You know, like, right. So it's like, you know, obviously, you know, we pay these people to go talk to them, but it's worth the investment, right? I think it is.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Day, because the last session that I went in there, I was pissing and moaning about some girl that you were exactly right. Part of what I get from it personally is to shed light on the dark sides of my psyche or my experience that I would otherwise have bouncing around cerebrally that do me no good.
Yeah.
A single guy, no kids, not married, working at home by himself for the past year. Things are great. I mean, I feel like my mental health is good, and
you can come hang out at my house anytime you want to, man.
I would love to. What was the
3
whiskey
kids.
what was the whiskey you were mentioning before?
I got a lot, bro.
Okay.
That's what 3 kids will do. Yeah.
Well, I won't have any
Don't
whiskey.
drink your mental health problems away. Let's just get that out of the way right now.
Yeah, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. You got me off track here.
Sorry.
But it's you know, having worked at home and spending so much time at my house by myself. I go to the gym and I come home and I work. That's a lot of time at like by myself where your thoughts are just with you and you don't get any like feedback.
Yeah.
Not any unbiased feedback. Like, oh, did you want to like say that out loud? Do you hear how that sounds?
Yeah.
Do you want to know how that sounds? Like you're just getting an unbiased, unvarnished opinion about the things that I get very cerebral. And I imagine that you're kind of a guy that does too. I like to split hairs.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I always wonder, like for people like working from home, because I always see my home as like my place of rest,
right?
My place to come and unwind. Is that hard for you to like work from home and then like have your place of kind of like, hey, I got all my stuff set up the way I want it, so I feel good. It's my cozy spot. I'm comfortable here. Is it hard to separate that, or do you lose kind of like? I mean, does that affect the way that you like mentally feel just in your house?
I would say more prominent is my inability to engage and be around people.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be an extrovert. I mean, we're social creatures as it is. I just think that you get some energy you pick up off of people's feedback a little bit. You kind of know your place in the pecking order. You kind of know where you fit in. When you're home alone all day, you just have no sense of that.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels like you're kind of drifting a little bit.
Yeah.
So then you start to question things, and then you start to doubt things, and then you fall into the hole, and then, you start asking yourself questions, and then that negative self-talk just perpetuates and perpetuates, and you get no outlet for it.
Yep.
You get no coping skills around it unless you actually do something about it.
So that's interesting, right? So this pandemic,
yeah,
I mean, that's exactly what that's done to 50 million people, right? And what did they turn to? Food and alcohol, man. I mean, it just, and the people who had like true issues and they're maybe like kind of coming out of it, and they just dump them inside and make them sit inside all day long. And it's like,
right.
Okay. Right. That's a good way just to get people to dive right into substance abuse and think about killing themselves. Cause I would love to go out and hang out with my friends, cause I would do that every Tuesday night, but I was told to stay inside the whole time. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting, that like thrown into the wrench of everybody's mental health as a society. I think people underestimate. I think we talk about it a little bit, but we don't want to open that whole Pandora's box, because then everybody will know that again, coronavirus is real and all this stuff is terrible, but you open up this Pandora's box of like, maybe the cure was better than or worse than the disease, are locking everybody inside and saying, don't go outside. All the stuff that we know is really bad for human beings, we told people to do.
Right.
Like, just don't even go outside.
Well, stream Netflix all day. It's fine.
Like, dude, I live in Southern California. Why can't I go outside and take a walk? Well, you got to wear a mask and you got to social distance. I'm like, again, I'm outside. Well, don't go outside. It's just kind of crazy how it's, you just put people in that and you almost make the problems worse. Yeah.
So not only are you at home with your own thoughts, but you also don't have like the freedom. You really appreciate it. Just, I maybe bitched about going into the office once or twice a week, but like, at least I could go.
Yep.
Now I don't have that outlet, and you just, I'm not the type of guy, and this is me personally, I'm not the type of guy, I work in sales. I'm not the type of guy that enjoys working all week in sweats.
Yeah.
That affects that affects my energy. That affects when I'm talking with my prospects. If I'm in sweats sitting, and I've been doing that all week, I bet my numbers reflect that.
Yep.
I need to be engaged. I need to have social feedback. So it wasn't an easy decision, and it may not, imagine that going to treatment wasn't an easy decision for you.
It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I delayed it. I just found every excuse not to go. Like,
sure.
When am I going to fit in my schedule? I have the money and this, that, and the other thing. And then it was just, you kind of just going, all right, well, I don't really have any excuses anymore. I got time in this day, and she's got time on that day. And the only reason why I wouldn't do it is because I'm being prideful, right? Yeah. I don't want to face that music, even though that's going to help me be better, be a better man, be a better husband, be a better dad, be a better friend, right? So
you kind of put the words in my mouth. I was going to ask, I'm just by myself, and I don't know if it's just that you're more paying attention to it, because yes, I actively know that I'm going to treatment. So I think you just pick up on things in your environment that maybe you would have overlooked before if you're just in your own shit all the time.
Yeah.
So I notice
awareness is key.
Yeah. I notice it personally. How does it show up in terms of you know, being a more present father, a more present husband. Where do you see those things manifesting, and how has it benefited you in that way?
Yeah, so I think growing up without a dad, you have no model of how to be a dad or how to be a husband, right? And if those were things you aspire to be or want in your life, and you have nothing to operate off of, your chances of success are very little unless you've had like a stepdad or a good mentor, or like, like if you had a buddy who you were really close with and his dad like understood what you're going through, so he kind of tried to model that to you a little bit.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have that either. So for me, going to therapy and kind of like pinpointing this inadequacy issue, it kind of allowed me to say, okay, so I've got two options, right? I can use this as an excuse to let it kind of drive things and be like, well, I am the way I am because you make me feel inadequate. Say that to my wife, or like, my kids aren't listening to me, so that makes me feel inadequate as a dad. It's their fault, right? That's an easy thing to fall into. But I approach it from a standpoint of like, the truth is that I'm probably not inadequate. I mess up. Everybody messes up. We're not perfect, right? But if I just treat my wife like I am an adequate husband, and I just am transparent with her about the way I feel about her or what I'm feeling, right? Again, that feelings word, right? We shouldn't operate 100% off our emotions.
That's a tough word for guys.
It is,
It's
right?
a really tough one.
It is. But we shouldn't operate 100% off of our emotions and feelings, right? We should have some intellectual processing of things. But there's some times where like you do need to like just go to my wife and tell like, hey, I appreciate you. You're a great mom. You're an awesome wife. I love you.
Yeah.
It's 8 seconds of pure raw emotion to her, and it lights up her day.
Yeah.
Right? How hard is that? And the equity that earns you is huge.
Yeah.
And then I feel, wow, man, that's good. I'm an adequate husband. Right? I did what I was supposed to do, and I could visibly see her change. And now I feel good about it, right? And then we just kind of build that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if my kids mess up or don't listen, if I sit down and kind of talk to them and try to dad them through situations, then it's like, okay, well, I'm trying to be adequate, right? If I just try hard not to screw my kids up, just easy to do. That's the long play, right? Like I've got, if I don't die, like, I've got a lot of time to dad my kids.
Right.
And that's an ongoing process. It should be called practicing. Parenting should be called practicing, right? Because we learn more about it. So, but I think just being there for them, being present for them is adequate, because I didn't even have that, right? So I'm already way ahead of the game on where I was.
Yeah.
In doing small things, like put my kids to bed every night, tell them that I love them, tell them I'm proud of them, right? Give them teachable moments, those type of things. Like, I try to think about the things where I hear of my friends who did have dads in their group, like, yeah, I'm like really lucky. I can call my dad now and bounce A, B, or C off him. I remember playing soccer or baseball with my dad in the yard, and I'm like, I didn't have that. I had my two brothers, right? And then it's like, okay, so I'm doing the right things. I just need to, fine tune things here and there, and stop and not focus on the inadequacy, but focus on how I am being adequate and build on that.
Right.
Right. So I think pinpointing the problem and then taking action on that is big. And I've seen just in the month, it's been huge improvements.
Yeah.
And just the way my wife and I communicate in our relationship, and it's been worth every penny just from that standpoint alone.
Would it be fair to say that once you've dealt with your own shit, that you mentioned awareness, would it be fair to say that once you've kind of cleared that out, or that you processed, you purged it?
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like when I go into my sessions, I purge.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then that's must be why they get paid the big bucks, because I mean, I'm one of probably 8 that day. I don't know how they contend with it. They probably have therapists too. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
But would it be fair to say that because you've dealt with your shit, that it makes you not only more aware, but more attentive and more present, I always feel like I'm turned inside out in a good way, more transparent. Yep. I'm not trying to hide secrets. I'm shedding light on the dark sides of me that, like, I'm not like super prideful, but they are me.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think once you find awareness of what's going on inside you, right? And whatever that may be. I mean, and there's like so many different like backgrounds and issues of people, why they go to therapy or why they need therapy, right? Mine is one that's big to me, but may seem inadequate, like may seem stupid to somebody else, right? But I think it allows you to feel comfortable in your own skin when discussing that, or being like, hey man, like I go to therapy, like, right? Like some people like, what? You're telling me that? It's like, yeah, it helps me a lot. mean, everybody. I mean, if you really talk to anybody, nobody is like perfectly well adjusted and normal.
Right.
Like you see, people should be seeing them like once a week or once a month or somebody just to sit down and kind of talk to and unload on it. And the way that some people kind of life coaches and executive coaches and business coaches, right? I mean, what are they doing really? I mean, they're giving people therapy about their issues either at work or something, right, to help them kind of process and get through things that they're running into mentally.
Yeah.
It's just they're really clever about the way they brand themselves. And I'm all about that. Like I 100% think that that's great. Like if you can see a therapist in many avenues in your life, that's good, right? So you can focus on your personal life, your business life, and improve from those different standpoints. So, but I think to circle back to what your question is if I think I'm understanding you correctly, yeah, it does make that discussion way easier and makes it's way easier to be transparent. Again, because if you just turn the light on and you find the awareness, then you kind of say, okay, all the problems are here, and then you are able to discuss those problems with somebody. Then you feel more comfortable, like, okay, I'm dealing with this.
Yeah.
Now I can relate to other people and kind of be more transparent and help them kind of understand, like, hey, like these are issues that not just you have, but I had them too, or I have them.
Yeah.
I'll never get rid of that issue. That'll probably be something I deal with my whole life. But again, that's why you build tools. You get a tool set to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, one of the things that my dad was very, very big on, and he went to therapy and he was open about it to deal with issues that he had with his father, my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
He noticed, we all did. I mean, it was a significant change in our family. I mean, he made the conscious decision that said, this shit stops with me.
Yep.
And I'm not going to let it continue on.
Yep.
And he is
generational change, man.
Yeah, for many other reasons, but specifically that one, he's definitely my hero for that.
Yeah.
What is it about growing up from a boy turning into a man that causes us to kind of keep these secrets, keep our shield up, keep our guard, our armor on? What is the fight, in your opinion, that we're always resisting against?
Like when it comes to like mental health and treatment and kind of facing those demons, so to speak?
Just being that open and why do we get to 37 to understand that going in and talking to a therapist and being transparent and open and being vulnerable and doing all this shit that like we don't like to do it.
Yeah.
But why do we have? What is it about growing up as a man that we feel like we have to like hide those things?
Well, I think, man, those are like, I think what you kicked it off with is like we're kind of taught to suppress things and shut things down and don't get emotional about things, and that requires you to do the complete opposite of that. Yeah, we're trained to kind of react that way, and then you're going into some place that's going to make you do the complete opposite and open stuff up, and you're gonna. I mean, there's stuff that like I don't remember that I started remembering because it's just in the splinters of the recess of my mind, right? Yeah. And you start talking about it, and these things kind of blossom and open up, and you're like, oh my, holy shit, this is really not normal, right? These things are really, really abnormal in my life, and it hurts, man. That's not fun. There's nothing fun about that. It's tough, and I think it's two things. I think it's a fake pride issue, but the root of it is just fear. I mean, I think people are I think men are super afraid of opening that door and just letting all that stuff out because they're afraid how they're going to respond. Because most guys, we come from a generation that's hugely from like broken homes and messed up grandparents and messed up dads and blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And if you really start to and if your life is screwed up because of that and you open that door, man, you're going to be you're going to be crying like you're a little girl. I hate that term because it's not true. Because most women are probably tougher than dudes, but like you're probably going to be crying, slobbering and, face down on the floor and using the whole tissue box and like, even though you don't have to tell anybody that, and that's therapist isn't going to tell anybody, you still went through that with someone in front of you. Yeah. And that's some people don't want to go through that. When you get that, like you talk to somebody about something like, oh, I'm not going to do that stuff. Instantly you're like, what are you really afraid of? Right. Mm-hmm. That's not for me. Right. That's always a great line. It's one of my favorites. That's not for me. Yeah. Okay. It's like,
the funny thing is that it's not even funny. It's when you go in and you purge those things or you go through a box of tissues, what we fail to understand or what we really need to recognize is that emotion was locked somewhere.
Yep.
That we held on to. It could have been from when we were 2, 3, 22, 42, whenever. It was locked. So in essence, it became a limiting belief or became a restriction or a negative experience. And we don't really realize how it affects how we navigate, how we show up, but it totally does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the interesting things is like the whole men don't cry issue, right? And I always think about it like, it's like, I'm not a crier. I don't cry. And I don't get super emotional about stuff, but I always wonder, like, if you feel like you're going to, like, what's your body trying to do with that? Like if you get misty-eyed and you start to feel, and then you go, you just push it down.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so what's the goal of the physiological response of that? And then what's the negative side effect of not doing it? Like nobody really knows. Like what's the outlet of crying? I don't know. That's probably something that's easily researchable, but like you always wonder, like, gosh, you push that down, does like the bad hormones start to flow? It's like your adrenaline and all these things start to flow, your blood pressure go up. It's like, does your heart rate go up? These things that if you cry, that stuff kind of explodes out and then everything gets better.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
I'll tell you what, it's always been my belief that when you suppress that stuff for long enough, those dogs have to get out.
Oh, and it's usually in a really bad way.
Yeah. They're going to find their way out. And that could be addiction. It could be gambling. It could be sex. It could be alcohol. I mean, it could be any number of things. Those dogs will get out.
Yep.
If left unattended.
Yeah.
So,
yep. And that's why, like, we live in this culture right now that is the very much of do what makes you happy, right? Do what makes you happy. Do you.
Yeah.
What makes you happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you just let people do that, there is never a time in the history of the world where it just devolves into a world of shit.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's never good.
Yeah.
It's like you're gonna let the inmates run the prison. Have fun with that.
Yep.
Right. And then when you find people who stand up against that, right? Again, the toxic, quote unquote, air quoting, toxic masculinity that say no, somebody stands up and tries to be the adult in the room. The mob tries to shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's like, no, like as men, if you're going to recognize that and say something about it, you're better playing. Like, first of all, you better be ready for the charge. Mm-hmm. And second of all, don't back down. Because the biggest thing that those people are afraid of is somebody who will not budge. And that's, I mean, it's huge, right? Yeah. And I kind of segued out of that what we're talking about. But I think it does kind of tie in like kind of why we're here and what we're talking about. I think if you get groups of guys who will say like, no, you cannot go out and have sex with 8 girls in 2 weeks. You're my son or you're my friend or something, like that's a bad thing.
Right.
You may feel good, but I'll tell you what, it's a bad thing. Like you can't do that to people. You can't do it to yourself. Mm-hmm. That's unhealthy practices. We know that.
Yep.
Like I can find you many journals of psychology that tell you that is a mental health problem. You are burying something else and you're pouring it out on other people in a bad way.
Projecting.
But then people say like, well, you're going to try to control people and tell them what to do. No, I'm telling you it's bad and it's stupid and you shouldn't do it. And if you don't like it, at some point, it's like either don't come to me about it or just deal with me being able to have that belief.
Right.
And so I think that's a hard thing to do, right? As a person to kind of stand against those types of things. Because that's rampant in the society that we live in now. And it's ugly and it's getting pretty nasty. So
yeah, it is. And I, that whole idea that you can take what you're feeling bad about and you can sort of project it onto other people without even being aware of it, without even realizing it. I'm guilty of it. Mm-hmm. Days when I felt like shit, when I wasn't feeling great about myself, I'd go and be a little bit more malicious even if I was just on the road, a little bit of road rage, you know? Again, those dogs are trying to get out and I'm just, no.
Yep.
It's a bad way to go. So, I always felt like you got to feel it to heal it. Mm-hmm. It's locked somewhere. And if I don't deal with it, if I don't contend with it, it's not going to be fun. But if I don't feel it, I'm never going to heal it.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah. It's, but we just don't do well with feels though.
No.
We have a hard time with that.
And we're told not to, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it creates a huge, huge vulnerability, right? And I think at some point, right, as boys, we were very kind of innocent within that. And then you felt that somebody took advantage of that vulnerability.
Yeah.
It usually happens in our formative years, right? You got that long-term high school girlfriend, then like she either cheats on you or breaks up with you or something bad happens, right? And then you're like, nope, that is not happening again to me. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be made to feel like the fool. I'm not going to be made to feel inadequate, blah, blah, blah. And then we kind of start.
There's that wall.
Yep. And then that wall.
Stacking that wall.
Yep, we were really good at building that thing and shoving rebar in it and making sure that nobody can break that thing down. And then eventually that just affects every area of your life, whether you want to believe it or not.
Yeah.
So.
Anybody who ever doubted the and this is gonna be related, but anybody who ever doubted that vulnerability and being open and receptive to even your weaknesses, your faults, was the wrong way to go. I get that it's a movie, but I always point to the final scene in 8 Mile.
I've actually never seen that movie. People, like, their eyes roll back in their head when I say it to them. I'm like, sorry.
That's a little surprising. I have to say.
I think we talked about this, so yeah, go lay that out.
It's the loose biopic on Eminem, the rapper, and his sort of coming up through Detroit, and basically, you know, they go to these rap battles, and throughout the movie, you have his personal life, but he's going to these rap battles, and it culminates at the end with the guy who's kind of his rival, or who's one of the better MCs in the Detroit area. And Eminem gets to go first. And before the other guy, who's got a laundry list of shit that he's about ready to go off on him about, his weaknesses and about how, you know, his girlfriend slept with a guy in their crew, and he grew up in a trailer park, and like all the shit that would just hurt. Yeah. He displays that all out there. Yeah. He's like, I know what he's going to say about me. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the guy's got nothing left. Yeah. And it's like, how can you hurt somebody who's just admitted everything that he was insecure or felt bad about? Yeah. Yeah. I get that it's a movie, but it's a pretty poignant statement about that being like a pretty big turning point for, like, that's where it's at. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think there's I could go the wrong direction, but I think it is true. Like, if you put that stuff out there, right, like, then how can people hurt you with it? Right. If you understand it, you know what it is, and you're dealing with it in a healthy way, then you can't be hurt by it. I mean, still people can hurt you. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't want to say that. We're not, you know, if you're open and feeling then like your spouse has an affair and you're right, that's going to hurt anybody. Right. But you know, if you get into a little tussle, like if you get into an argument and they say something that normally would have hurt you in the past, you can, you know, I've processed that, like, hey, you know, we always use the I statements. I feel like this when someone says that to me, you don't blame it on the other person. So, and that dispels that stuff easily, right? If you recognize it, you see it, you can process it, you can deal with it really quickly. And then you can explain to somebody like, hey, I feel this way when someone says that to me. You don't say, you make me feel this way, because then you put your feelings on them. It makes them responsible, which is unfair to people. That shouldn't be true. It allows them to kind of see, like, oh, like that person that I was just talking to just told me that they feel a certain way when something is said to them in this way, and maybe that wasn't right. And then automatically all that kind of tension dissipates, and then you can talk about it. Right. Right. And so but you got to know that, right? You have to know those things about yourself before you can get to that point, because then it just turns into you make me feel this way. It's your fault that this is going on in my life. And then you start pointing fingers, and then egomaniacs are perfect at that. Great. Yeah. There's no corner deep enough where you can back them in. They will always find a way out. Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get into that at some point in the future. But I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. Because the ego is, we're taught to have big egos, right? And I think, again, the society we live in and the internet and always having to be right, the ego is massive. You take someone's ego away from them, sometimes that's all they have, man. Especially if you don't have to talk to them face to face. Like, it's if you can dispel somebody's ego, then you realize that then everything gets really quiet. You know, so it's really interesting. The ego is very powerful, and it's and most times stupid. So. I don't remember who told me this, but it stood out to me, and I've always kind of carried it with me, is that people with really big egos tend to be small in every other area of their life. They're making up for some inadequacy somewhere, right? Something that's unaddressed in their life. Right. Something that happened to them that's leading to this kind of, I guess, ego is not really it can be construed as a mental health issue because it can really kind of waylay people around. It's good to have some. Yeah. You need some. Yeah. Yeah. But that inflated sense of self-importance, they tend to be very small in other areas. They major minor things, and they're just, it's just a facade. So have you read the book by Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy? No, but I have read Stillness is the Key. It's about stoicism. Yeah, and 365 Days of Stoic Philosophy. It's like a daily Stoic. Yeah. I usually fall off about May. Yeah. So I don't know if it's the warm temperatures that the Stoics lose, but yeah, his books are phenomenal.
Yeah, you should read Ego Is the Enemy. It's got some crazy stuff that you just shake your head at, like, I cannot believe person A or B did that. Like, I cannot believe you would be that like egomaniacal to just dig in such an unhealthy way that you are willing to crush people's lives around you.
Oh yeah.
Like people who own businesses who are like, I'm not wavering from this, even though it's headed on a road to hell with no reverse, and just bury the people around them.
Yep.
It's pretty unbelievable, man, how far pride and ego will take somebody, and how, again, like you said, there's something that's driving that.
Yep.
It's not just like the will to win, right? Because the will to win, people who have the will to win will find ways to win. Right? When you just like, well, I came up with this idea, this is mine, and I'm going to see this even if it goes straight into the ground. That's like not normal, right? That's not healthy. That's not normal. There's something else there that's causing that problem.
Yeah, there's a fixation on what you want.
Yeah.
So if I'll be the ego enemy. So if Aaron is if I'm the one with the big ego, I'm only focused on what I want, getting what I want. I care nothing of anybody else's experiences, their feeling, where they come from, what they prefer, if they like mayonnaise or mustard. I don't give a shit about that. I care about what I want, and you are either on my team to help me get me what I want, or you're in my way.
Yep. You're either with us or you were against us.
Yeah. And if you're my blood brother, I will throw you underneath the bus because you're, again, in my way, or you're on my team.
Yep.
So I'm happy to throw you underneath the bus.
Yep.
It's really that severe.
Yep. And that's where you do see a lot of that toxic masculinity that's rooted in a mental health issue that's unaddressed, but that you will drag other people with you and make them that same exact way. Mm-hmm. And that's when you have like reached a level of problems that are big time. Yeah. Right. And how do you come back from that? First, I mean, I don't know how you get around that pride and that ego issue. Again, like, we're not the experts here. We're just talking about this stuff and kind of throwing stuff out about the way we feel about things and what we see. But like, that's one of those issues that's really, really tough. Like, who's going to get through to that person? Right. I mean, usually those people have to bury themselves and get to the absolute bottom of the barrel and then look up and go, wow, like something really bad happened along the way, and then you got to figure that stuff out. So
it's a personality disorder, just like borderline, just like,
yep.
I mean, that's, there's a lot of, I think there's like 7 or 8 different personality disorders, but that is one of them.
Yep. The narcissism one is really, I mean, those are the toughest things because there's nothing you can really do to treat them.
Right.
Medications don't help. Therapy can kind of help sometimes, but those are like dangerous.
What are the other ones? So there's narcissism.
So there's narcissism. There's antisocial. There is social.
There's one about looks, and to be fair, I read it and I'm like, this is I have this.
Like narcissism or like histrionic personality.
Histrionic. Yeah. When I read it, I was like, yeah, this is.
Yep.
I'm gonna be straight up like, this is me for sure.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, I think the histrionic thing is, it's one thing if you care about the way you look. It's another thing if you're willing to make everything in your life super dramatic and manipulate people and like, this is the end of the world and no one else could ever know how I'm
for
feeling
sure.
Right
now.
Yeah. It's a whole, those people when you see them. So that's a whole.
Yeah. Another episode for sure.
But I think some of the big, we kind of covered a lot of ground and kind of flew around on that one. I think some of the big takeaways would be that, kind of process what you're going through. Like, find the moments that you do feel like those kind of stings of inadequacy or this kind of things that like why is that bothering me, right? I think you have to be introspective and honest with yourself. And I tell you what, like, nobody has the answers to that. I mean, therapy is great for that. That's where you do say, hey, I need to get someone else I don't really know this person, but they're trained in this and they're objective and they're not going to judge me. And, they're going to do everything they can to help me, and then seeking that out. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Now, can you do that? How easy is that for some people versus others? Again, it took me 25 years to do that.
Right.
So
people should question where some of that sting or where some of that emotion comes from. Yeah. If I'm in the passing lane and somebody's in front of me and I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah.
I'm just raging mad. Do I get pissed at the driver, or shouldn't I question where it's coming from?
Yeah.
We just don't that takes a little bit of inquisition. And
it's never our fault, right?
Right.
It's always somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where you have to really look at yourself and say, like, that can't be true.
Right.
But that's hard, right? I mean, again, if all this stuff were easy, we wouldn't be talking about it.
Sure.
So I don't want to minimize it, but I think it takes time and in those moments, or like self-reflective, like reflecting on like your day and going like, yeah, like, did I really need to flip that guy off and scream at him in the car? Like, was him going 5 miles under the speed limit, was it really that big of a deal? Right. Like, why is that making me mad? Well, I can't figure it out. Well, like, how can I figure that out? How can I get to the root of that problem? Because I don't want to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to lose my mind on somebody in the car, like in my car. Like, I think you got to be uncomfortable with the way you feel. Like, kind of think about that and say, like, is that the way I want to be? And if the answer is no, then you need to address that issue, right? And if the answer is yes, I want to be that way, then there's bigger problems.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point to end on. And I will I'll say that the last session I had with my own therapist, I went in and I was pissing and moaning about a particular subject, and I burned up a whole hour on it. Mm-hmm. And I tried to, justify it that it was actually a positive scenario, but I spent an entire hour real negative, real piss and vinegar about it. And when I left there, I'm like, yeah, I feel better. It was cathartic for me, and it needed to happen. But the further and more days away that I got from the session, I was actually ashamed in how I showed up to that session.
Yeah.
Cause I'm like, I was a baby for like an hour.
Nope.
I'm 37-year-old man. Like, I don't want to take that to work, but I would if I didn't deal with it in there.
Yep.
You just don't realize it until you have that like perspective or that awareness that you wouldn't otherwise get if you went. Is that fair to say?
No, I think it's perfectly fair. And I think that's huge. That one thing you did it, but there's another thing to think about. Like, that was not super productive. While it got some stuff out, it wasn't productive for your mental health just to go in and bitch and whine. And that's not what we want for people.
Oh, such a baby. Yeah, just a whiny baby. It was horrible.
And that's not the goal of therapy, right? It's not your goal just to go in there. I mean, if that's the case, just find a wall to scream at for an hour, right?
Yeah.
That's not the point of therapy, right? It's a time. It takes time to go through that.
Yes.
And it's a lot of talking and it's a lot of digging. So I think it's but it's so beneficial. I don't know anybody that's gone to therapy that turned around the other end and said that was not for me. That was a waste of time. That was a waste of money. I didn't get anything out of that.
Yeah.
Who didn't actually give it a good.
Freud was right, man. He had it.
A long time ago too, man.
Yeah, he did. All right, that's going to wrap it up for episode 2 at Men Explain. Thank you so much. We are going to display some numbers here at the end of the episode. If you are having issues with, you need to talk to somebody about maybe you're feeling suicidal, or if you need an outlet, you feel like you want to hurt yourself, hurt other people. There's outlets. There's places to go. There are people to talk to. We want to make sure that you guys have that information. So we're going to display that at the end. But thanks again for joining us here. We will catch you on the next episode here at Men Explained. Cheers. Hey guys, thanks again for joining us on another episode here at Men Explained podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also the bell icon as well, so you can be notified when we push out new videos. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and drop them at hosts, that's plural, HOSTS, at menexplainedpodcast.com, or just visit our website, menexplainedpodcast.com. Thanks again.